Good afternoon. Welcome to the Labor Forum. You are tuned in to WRFG 89.3 FM on a really hot, humid day here in Atlanta. My name is Diane Mathowitz. I'm co-host of the Labor Forum, a retired auto worker who worked for 30 years on assembly lines for General Motors. I want to welcome all of you who are listening on your radio, those that are tuned in via your computer, those that are listening on your app, which is available also at the WRFG website, and of course those of you who are watching us live on our Labor Forum YouTube channel. I want to say hello to Paul McLennan, who is co-host with me. Hi, Paul.
Hey.
So we have a great show today. I think it's going to be really interesting. We have two guests in the studio. We will be having a call-in from the executive director of the BlueGreen Alliance later at 4:30. But let us start off with our opening two segments that we do. I want to make sure that you're aware that the opinions that are expressed on this program may not necessarily be those of the board of directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG, but we are your listener-supported community radio station. And that means who's on our airwaves are those in the community who are ignored or disrespected or just totally obliterated by the big business media, where it seems as though our concerns and our solutions to problems, you never hear about them much. So let's start first with our segment, which is called Labor Headlines. And let me just tell you a few things that happened recently. This past Friday and Saturday, July 25th and 26th, more than 1,300 fast food workers from across the country assembled in Villa Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, just 4 miles from the corporate headquarters of McDonald's. The focus of the workers' convention was the fight for $15 an hour and the right to join a union. At the current minimum wage of $7.25 an hour and working 40 hours a week, a worker would make the poverty-level income of $15,000 a year and have no benefits. And most of the 4 million workers in the fast food industry are not scheduled for 40 hours a week. Most of them work between 24 and 30. By comparison, McDonald's CEO this past year was paid almost $10 million. So in other words, these CEOs of these fast food industry businesses make more in one day than most of their workers make all year. Some 180 workers from Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas participated in the high-energy meeting, which featured speakers such as Reverend Barber of the Moral Monday movement of North Carolina. And in related news, the pressure of the campaign for $15 an hour contributed to a recent contract in Los Angeles, signed by SEIU, that's Service Employees International Union, to raise the wages of 20,000 school cafeteria workers, custodians, and others to $15 an hour by 2016 from the current $8 or $9 they receive. Today's AJC had a front-page article on the loss of so-called mid-wage jobs, with annual salaries ranging from $31,600 to $57,500 a year since the recession of 2007 and 9. Georgia's jobless rate, which was one of the highest in the country, hit a high of 10.4% in that winter of 2009 and 10, and is now a reported 7.4%. Still among some of the nation's highest. It's over the national average. The report says that 388,032 jobs were lost in the state during the recession, 52% of them in the mid-level of wages. And the state has regained just 208,700 jobs, but less than 30,000 of them, 30,000 out of the 208,000, almost 209,000, pay a living wage. By far, the biggest increase is in low-wage employment. So no wonder that business magazine called Georgia the #1 state for business. And the last thing I want to mention in the headlines: issues of war and peace are among the most critical for the workers' movement to understand. Today is the 100th anniversary of the start of World War I. a catastrophic world event that resulted in the deaths of some 16 million people, almost 7 million of them civilians, and an additional 20 million soldiers and civilians were injured. The battlefields covered Europe, and dozens of countries, including the US and Japan, besides the major European powers and smaller nations, were engaged in the war. We are taught in our history classes that it was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Sarajevo, Bosnia, in June of 1914 by a Serbian nationalist that caused the war. What were the underlying causes, though? In fact, the real causes. Conditions not so dissimilar to today's multiple wars and military interventions. To name a few, Bosnia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Slavic peoples of the region wanted to be part of Serbia and not be ruled by others. The major colonial powers, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Belgium, and Spain, had divided up Africa at the end of the 19th century, and a race for control of parts of Asia was underway, spheres of influence also sought after by Japan and the US. This inter-imperialist rivalry for the resources, cheap labor, and markets produced burgeoning militarization and the development of new weaponry, including gas warfare. They used mustard gas, for example. World War I ended with the defeat of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires and Germany by the French, British, and US, and laid the groundwork for World War II. Rather than being the war to end all wars, this human disaster planted the seeds for today's current ongoing struggles, such as in Palestine. That is why here on the Labor Forum, we consider issues of war and peace to be some of the issues that we cover. And that's our labor headlines for today. Now we're turning to Paul McLennan, who every week brings us some really, sometimes he uncovers things hardly known, and sometimes they are pretty well known, but he always has a good twist on it. So what you got for us today, Paul?
Okay, thank you, Diane. This week, on July 29th in 1970, after 5 years of strikes and boycotts, table grape growers in California signed their first collective bargaining agreement with the United Farm Workers. The contract, which covered over 10,000 workers, ended labor contracting and established seniority and hiring rights, included an immediate wage increase, and provided for fresh water and toilets in the fields, and a medical plan. Farm workers faced severe oppression, not only in California, but all over the country. The itinerant nature and physical stress of the work gave employers tremendous power over their labor. They housed workers in shacks and sometimes not at all, forcing them to sleep under bridges. They paid workers almost nothing. The extreme heat of California farming regions caused heat stroke and deaths. The short-handled hoe workers had to use in order to weed the fields caused severe back problems. Workers were routinely sprayed with pesticides. Institutionalized racism made everything worse, with local citizens and police uniting with the growers to keep farm workers in their place. Farm workers also did not receive protection from New Deal labor legislation. After lobbying by growers, the National Labor Relations Act and Fair Labor Standards Act excluded agricultural workers. There was a long history of farm worker organizing in California. Filipinos who were recruited to the state's farms after the U.S. colonized their homeland began organizing in the 1930s and laid the groundwork for the formation of the United Farm Workers. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee was the major Filipino farm labor organization by the 1960s. During the same period, community organizers Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez started an organization called the National Farm Workers Association to organize the growing number of Mexican workers in the fields. In 1965, the Filipinos in their union went on strike against the grape growers near Delano, California, in order to get a raise of 20 cents an hour, better living conditions, and fair hiring practices. As usual, the owners refused to negotiate. The Filipino workers reached out to Chavez and the National Farm Workers Association. The Mexican laborers voted to join the strike, and the two groups merged in 1966 to create the United Farm Workers. A month after the strike began, the union began picketing grape growers and boycotting the buying of grapes. On March 16, 1966, Caesar organized a 25-day, 340-mile march from Delano to Sacramento, the state's capital, to generate support from the nation regarding the strike. There were 75 people when the march started. On April 10th, the marchers arrived in Sacramento with over 10,000 people present at the rally. That same year, a grower signed the first contract for farm workers in the U.S. The union then moved on to their next target. When that grower refused to negotiate, another strike and boycott was called. The boycott spread to Canada and Europe, and grape sales decreased. May 10, 1969 was declared International Grape Boycott Day. The shipment of table grapes was almost completely stopped to the cities of Boston, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Montreal, and Toronto. This boycott was the most effective union-directed consumer boycott in this country's history, and the strike was the largest ever taken by farm workers. The strike officially ended on July 29, 1970. In an effort to seek justice, dignity, and respect, UFW leaders, its members and supporters, organized and joined picket lines and marches, formed alliances across nationalities, signed petitions, supported labor laws, lobbied elected officials, distributed educational flyers, produced documentaries, wrote songs, performed plays, held teach-ins, went on hunger strikes, and organized boycotts. The organizing done by farm workers was inspired by the civil rights movement. In a similar way, many UFW activists were beaten, and a few were even killed for supporting the right of farm workers to organize a union and negotiate for fair labor contracts. In a telegram to the UFW, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity." Today, farm workers continue to toil under harsh working conditions, yet farm worker organizations continue to march on. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Florida and the Farm Labor Organizing Committee in North Carolina are two examples. The best way to honor this anniversary of the United Farm Workers' landmark success would be to support human rights and dignity for farm workers and to strengthen the right to organize.
Thank you, Paul. I remember that boycott very well. I didn't eat grapes for many, many years. I also remember, this is 69, this was the height of the Vietnam War, and when consumers weren't buying grapes anymore because we were supporting the farm workers, who do you think stepped in? It was the Pentagon. They bought grapes by the ton to try to save those growers who were refusing to negotiate with their workers, and shipped them to Vietnam elsewhere for the troops. Just the interesting thing about which side are you on? So I want to thank Paul for that, and I want to introduce our two guests that are in the studio. We're excited because this is a victory here that we want to talk about. And while we always want to encourage news, because we don't get a lot of news from the big business media about the campaigns and the long struggles that take place, we even get less news when those struggles win. So I want to introduce our two guests who are here from AFSCME. They are both Atlanta Public School workers. We have Quentin Hutchins in the studio. Hi.
Good afternoon.
And we have Gwen Johnson. Hi, Gwen.
Good afternoon.
So let's start off first with, first, congratulations
Thank you.
for making some major achievements. But let's start first with the two of you telling us what the issues were that you were fighting APS management to rectify. You want to start, Quentin?
Yes, first off, better working conditions. being called in outside the calendar set before, not being paid.
Not being paid, that's a big deal.
Yes. Yes.
I should have mentioned, you're a bus driver.
Yes, I
And
am.
Gwen, I'm sorry, what is your job?
I'm a bus driver.
You're both bus drivers, okay. So you had the responsibility for safely taking Atlanta school children to and from their homes, to their schools. And one of the many things, of course, people remember is the gallant, heroic, I don't even know how many words we can use, beyond the call of duty, brave, whatever, work of Atlanta school bus drivers and other bus drivers
Yes.
during the big snowstorm.
Yes.
So after the management people, thank you, then they proceeded to do what? Not pay you.
That's correct. Not pay us. Really not respecting what we do for the children and the other employees of Atlanta Public Schools.
Okay, so I know that there were issues, because I attended some of the events that AFSCME had. I know there were issues with the cleanliness in the cafeterias and everybody's working conditions of being short-staffed, overworked, underpaid. So I know you had multiple picket lines. Could you talk about all the things that you did to try to alert the community about what was really going on regarding the health and safety, frankly, of their kids?
After trying to sit down with the leaders of Atlanta Public Schools and they failed to want to interact with us, we had to bring it to the public. Sad that we had to do that, but we went knocking on doors, bringing the light to what's going on, infestations in the cafeteria, mold, out of date, serving the children of Atlanta out of date food, back to the buses for as cleanliness of the restrooms, lack of supplies, overcrowded buses, just a lack of respect for the employees.
So I know, like I said, I know that you had multiple picket lines. Gwen, so besides going door to door, I mean, did you all, I don't know what you all did. Did you give letters to the kids, or how did you get in touch with the parents?
Well, a lot of times what we did was after we get up in the morning and we deliver these children to school, we picket the downtown at Trinity, where we let them know that we're not going to not pick up the kids, because we love the kids, we love our jobs, and we appreciate it. But we wanted to let you know that we are still here. You know, even though we drop them off, we go back and we pick them up, we take them back home. But we wanted to let Atlanta Public Schools know that we're here too. It's not a robot that's picking up your kids. It's not a robot that's bringing them back home. It's not a robot that's trying to make sure they get home and get to the school safely, because we have a lot of drivers that don't care about the big yellow bus. No, let me get by. Let me come around. Let me push you back. But when you understand that, then you running a bus that has 90 kids on it, and you're only supposed to have 72, but you're doing it. And so we're just trying to get the parents to understand that we're not saying this because of it, but we're trying to keep it safety. We don't want your kids harmed.
All right, so if you could tell us now, I know within the last couple of weeks or the last couple of days, some changes were put into effect. So what is it that the drivers, the school cafeteria workers, and others who are now members of, well, it's not just the members of AFSCME, it's all those workers, they're all covered. What is it that they can expect?
After picketing and passing out flyers, they talked about when last year that they was going to take the money back for the 5 days that we came in early. We no longer have to worry about that. They said they're not going to take the money back.
Let's explain that. I remember when I read about this or heard about it. So they called you in for training or something, correct?
Correct.
Last year.
Yes,
So like about this time last year.
correct.
And then after you spent 5 days being trained, they said, well, thank you very much. It was on your own time, correct?
Correct.
And you all said, I'm sorry, no.
No. Once a calendar is set, we do understand that things happen, but just a slap in the face, last minute notification about coming in early for training, and then deciding not to pay us was a big issue. That was just like, like you say, thank you, but thank God that you have a job. No, so we don't have to worry about that anymore.
So as I recall, your protest last year generated the pay.
Yes,
Then they said, but we didn't really mean to pay you. We're going to take it back.
that is correct. That is correct.
But now you got it to keep.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And what else?
In that 5 day that we got back, we also was able to receive 5% pay increase because we haven't been paid in 7 years.
No
Sometime
increase,
10.
no wage increase in
no
7
cost
years.
of
So they
living,
think it's like the
nothing.
prices are 7 years
Nah,
ago.
everything going up, but our money was going down. It was kind of hard, but for the first time in 7 years, Atlanta Public Schools gave us a 5% across the board pay increase, and also for the first time in Atlanta Public School history, they usually would hire anywhere from 20 to 40 people during the school year. This year they had approximately 110, I think.
Full time.
For full time.
Yeah, let me ask about that, because I saw that in the press release. So how many people had been classified part-time? Or do you know?
Over 100.
Okay, so those part-time workers essentially now are all full-time.
All full-time.
Plus they hired a few more.
True.
Well, I know that when the Labor Forum has had some of the cafeteria workers on before, and they told us about the number of meals that they had to prepare with 1 or 2 people.
Yes.
It was astonishing that they thought that the food could be prepared in a healthy manner and on time and done well. When the workers told us they always had to clean up for a considerable amount of their shift because of the the infestation of
Yes.
bugs and rodents.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you can tell us about you got? Those are the main things?
Major election wins with the board members. They're listening to the workers now. With the new superintendent, she is willing to meet with us to rectify some of the issues that we have. Even though we've been in a slump a good period, but we can see the light. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel because they are starting to listen to their workers.
Can you explain how a memorandum of understanding works? Because I know for a lot of people who belong to unions, they have a contract. And I know for the public sector, and I'm retired from MARTA, we're one of the only groups of public sector employees that have a contract. What is a memorandum of understanding? Is it like a contract?
It is like a contract. It's an agreement between management and workers. Those that do not offer contracts, that's where the memorandum of understanding come in, because you struggle and you fight and you fight and fight and you don't want to lose what you have won. So in order to keep the playing field level, sometimes management get amnesia. So
This has binding power.
right. So as long as you have it in black and white,
Yeah.
that you're able to reference to, it's good, and that's what the memorandum of understanding is.
Thank you for clarifying that. I want to thank both of you for coming in today, and I want to let if there's a Atlanta Public School worker out there who doesn't currently belong to AFSCME, give them an opportunity to contact the union. You are going to get these benefits, even though you didn't pay any dues or participate, but you know
Correct.
that you'll do way better
Correct.
if you had 100% participation.
Yes.
And that's what Worker Solidarity is all about. So do you want to give us either a phone number or a website, email for how anybody could get a hold of AFSCME? I know they can just go online and look.
That's usually the quickest way, and you can also find us on Facebook. I think we're getting ready to go on Twitter as well. So we're just letting you know that we are here, we're ready, we're moving up, we're AFSCME, and we just love it.
Now, do you have any event coming up that we can let our listeners know, or are we good?
This Saturday we have a Stuff the School Bus campaign, and the bus drivers, transportation in the city of Atlanta are playing kickball against one another. We're all under AFSCME, so if they would like to donate school supplies for the less fortunate, come out Saturday at Carver High School, which is off of McDaniel, off of Pryor Road, between the hours of 11 and 5, and just come out, have fun with us, and meet your transportation department.
Thank you again. Thank you so much, Quentin Hutchins and Gwen Johnson, both members of AFSCME, both Atlanta Public School bus drivers. And the kids go back to school Monday.
Next Monday, August
So
4th.
everybody who's a driver, pay attention to those yellow school buses.
Please.
Make sure that you help keep those kids safe. Thanks a
Please.
lot. We're going to go listen to an important message from WRFG, and our next guest is on the phone. We are going to be talking to the executive director of the BlueGreen Alliance, which is an alliance of major unions and environmental groups, and this is going to be an important discussion. Please stay tuned. We're back. You're listening to the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM in a very sunny day here in Atlanta. And I have to say I am so excited and thrilled to be able to have our next guest talk to us here in the on the Labor Forum. We are speaking from Washington, D.C., Kim Glas, and Kim is the executive director of the BlueGreen Alliance. Welcome to the Labor Forum, Kim.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on this afternoon.
So there's, we only have about 25 minutes to cover a world of issues, but I wanted to, if you wouldn't mind, start off by explaining to our listeners who may not have heard of the BlueGreen Alliance exactly what it is, its purpose, and perhaps some of its members. You should know that I am a retired member of the UAW, and Paul, who's sitting next to me, is with ATU. So we're a little bit familiar with the BlueGreen Alliance because both of our unions nationally are involved.
That's right. Well, thank you again for having me on the show. The BlueGreen Alliance is a national partnership of some of our country's largest labor unions, including the auto workers and ATU, and some of the most influential environmental organizations. So in total, the group represents 16 million members and supporters, working really on environmental challenges and job integration in terms of economic development, and how can we have both a clean environment and good employment. And so that's the drive of this group. Our members are a wide range. We have utility workers, steel and auto manufacturing, building and construction workers, teachers, transit operators, hospital and healthcare employees, and telecommunication workers, just to name a few. So it's a very broad and diverse group.
Well, the reason in particular that we asked you to be on the show today is, of course, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is holding hearings around the United States, just 4. And one is here in Atlanta, and it starts tomorrow, goes all day tomorrow, I think from like 8 or 9 in the morning till 8 at night, both Tuesday and Wednesday, soliciting comment from residents of the area, people who live in the southern states, about the impact of these new proposed regulations on carbon emissions. So it's really important because one of the major things that it has been happening here is that it's very interesting. The Labor Forum actually got a press release from a group called the Consumer Energy Alliance. And one might think, oh, a grassroots group that is supporting the idea of good jobs and clean air. But no, this is a group really funded by the power companies and other carbon industries to actually prevent these regulations from going into effect. And they are using the cover that by having to get the technology that will help scrub the air of all these toxic elements that are produced by coal and other forms of carbon based fuels, that'll cause the loss of jobs. So really, this is what I wanted you most to address, Kim. This is something that happens all the time, where the interests of workers are really turned on their head. So if you wouldn't mind talking about how it is that the BlueGreen Alliance responds to that kind of false information.
Well, that's really something. There's probably going to be a variety of groups with different names out there, which their names may sound, that they're well-intentioned and then put out information like that. The BlueGreen Alliance, we support the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to limit carbon pollution from power plants. And we think that this rule is an opportunity for job creation. So we believe efforts to reduce carbon emissions should go hand in hand with efforts to achieve a net increase in the number and quality of family-supporting jobs. We all know climate, we need to act on climate. You can see right there in Georgia, if we're looking at the southeast, the average annual temperatures in the region have increased about 2%. Winters are getting warmer, and this past winter we had strange phenomenons of polar vortexes. Georgia especially is positioned given the fact that the state has a 100-mile coastline. So changes in our climate result in higher temperatures, heavier precipitation, and sea level rises. But as part of this rule that came out from the administration in June, and that there's public hearings in Atlanta, Denver, Washington, D.C., and Pittsburgh this week, the BlueGreen Alliance is really fighting for job opportunities that can be created under the rule. And there's a variety of ways that can happen. First, the EPA has provided states and regions the flexibility in terms of how they want to implement this standard. So what can they do to sort of retool power plants to make them more efficient? How can they increase utilization of existing natural gas-fired power plants and expand technologies like wind and solar? And it also increase energy efficiency in our homes and businesses. It's astronomical how much energy is wasted at buildings because air conditioning is leaving the building. And how much energy is lost off our transmission of our wires. So there's real opportunities here to try to come in compliance with the rule, but also create good, high-paying jobs.
I have a question, Kim, about public transportation and the role that you see it can play in terms of environmental justice.
Absolutely. I was just meeting with the president of ATU just last week, and we were talking about the fact that more and more young people are using public transportation as a means to get to work and to go shopping and visit friends. And so I think it's a real opportunity, especially with the younger generation, and expanding that. What are some of the opportunities here to get some cars off the road and people using public transportation more? It's economical. You don't have to sit in traffic as long. It's efficient. And so I think that is a huge opportunity, to really highlight those opportunities for the American people.
And in terms of the issue of jobs, Diane, I remember when I started at MARTA, we had MARTA buses that were made by General Motors. And I think at some point along the line, they got out of that business. So even if we got to a point where there were fewer cars on the road, there will always be a need for jobs to create, to build buses and trains, and so it could be redirected to other
Absolutely. This is just, I've told this story in the past. The GM and the big three had the same sort of response when it was required that they increase the miles per gallon of a vehicle. And
Right.
they went on and on and on about how this just wasn't going to work, and this was this, and all jobs would be lost, and everything went on and on. And they actually approached workers. I remember this so well because I couldn't believe it. They passed out postcards to all of us on the job, where as auto workers, we were supposed to implore the EPA, don't do it, it'll cost our jobs. And I thought to myself, I'm not just a worker, I have to breathe this air. What? Are they really
Right.
asking me to commit suicide when I walk out the door and breathe the air? And I thought, they aren't very concerned about the air inside the plant either, to tell you the truth. So it strikes me, I wanted to next approach this other issue, because it seems to me what the energy companies have really promoted is what they're calling the war on coal. And they present the coal miners and the Appalachian regions and others as about how this will devastate these parts of the country. I have the same response I sort of did when they wanted me to sign this card saying that I wanted to keep gas-guzzling cars on the road. Appalachia is one of the poorest parts of the country and has been for decades. Coal miners have died by the thousands in unsafe mines and have had black lung. And then somehow we're supposed to believe that these coal mining companies are somehow concerned about the health and safety and lives of the workers that they have exploited for generations. What's your comment about how that is working out?
Well, I think there's a lot of activity, especially in Pittsburgh this week, among the coal mine workers who are obviously worried about their jobs and their future and what this means for them. And I think the point that I want to emphasize here is we actually hope the mine workers continue to stay engaged as states move forward with their plans to meet these standards. What happens is if a state does not engage in developing a state implementation plan to meet this rule, the EPA ends up making the plan for that state. So each state has sort of a toolbox that they can go to in order to meet the plan, but not engaging with the federal government, not creating a state implementation plan will force the EPA to write the rule for a state. And it won't necessarily keep all those industries in mind, including, the future for the coal industry, and a lot of that's going to be transition work. Obviously, there's going to be some coal plants that are going to shut down as a result of our resurgence of natural gas. And so we really need to make sure that we're not leaving those workers behind as we transition to a cleaner, more efficient energy.
Well, it strikes me that there must be thousands of jobs that could be available in reforesting and trying to reclaim the devastated land in West Virginia and Kentucky and elsewhere that the mine companies have just blasted to smithereens with mountaintop coal production, and likewise in the far west. So, go ahead.
No, I think there is an opportunity here about helping to not only clean up our environment, but also because the rule has brought flexibility and will really allow states to develop plans that need highly skilled workers for these jobs and energy efficiency. in the renewable sector, that I think that there's some opportunities to retrain workers and take that skill set and use it to meet these new plans and to meet the standards by the EPA.
Could you explain, Kim, what the BlueGreen Alliance does on a day-to-day basis, and what it would look like in terms of a local community wanting to get involved on these issues that you're working on?
Great. So the BlueGreen Alliance is this partnership between all these organizations with 16 million members. And we have offices here in Washington, D.C., that engaged on a federal level with the administration. We have offices in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which has staff in different areas like Ohio and in Michigan and Illinois, who engage on a local level with both unions and environmental groups on a whole host of issues, including this Clean Power Plan. And we have an office in California, because California is a leader in the nation on many of these environmental issues. So we engage very much both on the local and on a federal level in this engagement between labor and environment to help find the pathway forward into creating jobs and addressing our environmental needs and concerns.
So I want to follow up on that. So does that mean that this is mostly engagement with elected officials, with kind of a lobbying process, or are you engaged in grassroots educational work and grassroots educational work?
We're an educational organization, so we engaging with our labor partners and with the environmental partners, both on the ground and here in Washington. We also do engage with the federal government about where our group stands on certain issues. And so I would very much say that our group is always finding ways to bring different stakeholders together to try to find the pathway forward on a whole host of issues. And, as a group, we support EPA's authority about the carbon pollution for power plants. I think that's a significant statement by this group. I plan on testifying here in Washington tomorrow and testifying in Pittsburgh. And I understand that there's already been 300,000 written comments on the Clean Power Plan that have been submitted, and approximately 1,600 people are testifying across Denver, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, and Washington over this next week.
Yeah, the information about tomorrow's hearings, that's correct. All the slots for both Tuesday and Wednesday have been filled. There is a way for people to go ahead and still submit their own comments. This hearing is taking place at the Sam Nunn Federal Building here in downtown Atlanta, just a block from the Five Points MARTA station. It is open to the public. In addition, there are other activities that people can be engaged in. I don't know if this is true in the other cities as well, but at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning in front of the Sam Nunn Federal Building, there will be a press conference featuring a number of elected officials, unions, environmental group representatives, etc. And then at noon, starting in Woodruff Park, although we activists here in the city of Atlanta call it Troy Davis Park, starting at Woodruff Park at Peachtree and Marietta, there will be a gathering with a march to the Sam Nunn Building for a rally. That gathering starts at noon, the march starts at 1, and with the rally will probably end about 2. So that's just some of the ways that folks here in Atlanta can engage in this and make their position known about how we all want clean air. I wanted to ask you a question again about Atlanta and Georgia. The Georgia Power Plant here in just outside of Macon, I believe, is considered the dirtiest plant in the whole country. Do you have that information too?
I know Georgia ranks high on the list in terms of carbon pollution.
Yes.
And a recent report actually found, and regarding the carbon pollution by that particular plant, that there is a technology, and Department of Energy has made a significant release about this last week in Petronova, a coal-firing plant in Texas, and there's $1 billion in investment into that coal plant for carbon capture sequestration to essentially take that carbon out of the air and pump it under the ground. And so I think that certain plants are looking at retooling as a result. I don't have information on that specific plant, but there is this technology out there. Now, it is very expensive, and it's, I think this is the first time it has been employed in the United States, but other countries are starting to use this technology to retrofit these coal-fired plants.
Well, I just want to make a comment again about what's considered expensive. Because the rate of asthma here in Atlanta is very high, and in Georgia.
Right.
The loss of job hours, the loss of loved ones to respiratory illnesses and a whole variety of other things that come along with having dirty air, whether it's on the job or in your neighborhood, is a huge financial and more than that, just human issue. So when these power plants talk about how it's too expensive, I think to myself about the hospital bills, the pain and suffering, and all the rest that is suffered by all of us as a result of them wanting to make a profit off of whatever process they're using. So to me, this cost business,
right.
Cost business is just who's paying. Right. That's the question. Who's paying?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say here is, look, while the technology right now is expensive, in order for technology, remember the old cell phone from the 1980s that everyone carried around in a briefcase. And as that technology advanced, we have lighter weight cell phones that are less expensive these days. So technology is a good thing, and there's real opportunities under that rule to help develop those technologies and develop those jobs in those industries. But there's a significant human toll and a health toll that not addressing this issue will continue. And there's also a toll on our nation's infrastructure. So as climate change, our temperatures are rising, sea levels are rising, more catastrophic weather events that have taken a human toll, tornadoes and hurricanes. I mean, this is creating, the cost is by far exponential. And this is something that I think these hearings you'll hear from a variety of different stakeholders, from, nurses to doctors, to manufacturers, to environmental groups, to labor organizations. I think this is a real important time. I did want to let you know that the hearing location for Atlanta did change as a result of the large-scale public.
Oh, right. There was a power outage.
Right. So it's now been moved to the Omni Hotel for people who just want to sit down and participate and listen in. It's from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And for Atlanta listeners who don't know where the Omni Hotel is, it's right next to CNN there on Marietta, across from Centennial Olympic Park. So the march route is essentially from the park down Marietta Street to in front of the Omni Hotel. I want to thank you so much, Kim, for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate both your comments and your time. Can you very quickly give our listeners some other kind of contact information for the BlueGreen Alliance?
Yes. For people who are interested in learning more about the BlueGreen Alliance, including our contact information for our different offices, you can go to our website. It's bluegreenalliance.org. And thank you so much for having me on the show today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for presenting all this information. And we certainly look forward to tomorrow here in Atlanta, when we anticipate that there are plans for hundreds of people to come from around the Southeast to both participate in the hearings and to participate in this march, which I do want to now correct the information that is being played on WRFG. Our PSA is a little bit out of date. So the march does start at noon at Woodruff Park tomorrow, Tuesday, at noon for a gathering. March to start at 1, And now the destination, thank you, Kim, is
Thank you.
is the Omni Hotel on Marietta Street across from Centennial Olympic Park and right there by CNN Center. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Kim.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
So, listeners, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Kim Glas, who is Executive Director of the BlueGreen Alliance. And I just wanted to say that I think it's a really forward step by the multiple unions that are participating in this. And, of course, I think also for the environmental groups to recognize that this false dichotomy of jobs and a clean environment requires that we work together to both produce good-paying jobs, which sort of the labor headlines article that was in today's paper about how there's such a dearth of decent jobs, and that this advancement to figuring out how to produce energy in a safe and clean way is clearly something that can provide both good jobs and a good, healthy future for not just us in the United States. I really meant to talk about that because what happens in every country is not like the air stops at our borders. It goes over the whole wide world. So that's a big situation that everybody needs to take part in changing. So Paul's shaking his head yes, because we we are being videoed, but you can't see that. So I want to remind everybody again that, and thank everybody who participated in the pledge drive here at WRFG, our summer fund drive. We didn't quite make the goal, but we did pretty good, and that means that there's still plenty of time, anytime, for you, our loyal listeners and our loyal video watchers, to make a donation to keep this program and all the other quality music programs and public affairs programs that you only can hear here on WRFG 89.3 FM. As has been mentioned many times, this station was launched 41 years ago. It has had a volunteer staff, a volunteer on-air personalities, and we have only 2 paid staff to operate a station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and of course every day of the year. So if you are so inclined, and I hope you are, you will go ahead and pledge online at wrfg.org. There's a donate button, and if you would be so kind, you can attribute your donation to the labor forum. That lets our station management know that we in fact have listeners who appreciate this program. And of course, if you'd like to be on the email list for the labor forum, we send out an announcement a couple days before the Monday program to let you know who's going to be on, who's going to be the guest on, what is the topic on the program. So go ahead and send your information to laborforumwrfg@gmail.com. That's it for today. I'm Diane Mathewitz saying goodbye.